30,000 years ago, humans discovered a plant that destroyed the concept of famine. It produces food 12 months a year. Root, shoot, pollen, seed. Every single part is edible. It grows in every climate where water touches land. It produces 10 times the starch of potatoes per acre. And it does all this without a single drop of fertilizer, without tilling, without even planting. For 30,000 years, this was humanity's grocery store. Then, in 1849, the United States Congress passed a law. Not to protect this plant, to destroy it. To drain the grocery store. They replaced a perennial system of abundance with annual farms that poison our water. And they called the most useful plant in history a weed. This is the story of the supermarket of the swamp that we threw away just before we needed it most. Let me take you back 30,000 years, along the banks of the Yangtze River in China, to an archaeological site dated to the Paleolithic era. Researchers analyzing ancient tools found something that shouldn't be there. Starch grains, not from wheat, which didn't exist yet, not from rice, which wasn't domesticated, from the roots of a wild wetland plant. They found human residue proving that long before the invention of agriculture, before anyone thought to plow a field, people were processing this plant into flour. Now jump forward to a site in Italy, also 30,000 years old. Grinding stones covered in the same residue. This wasn't a backup food. This was a staple. In a world where survival meant knowing what to harvest first, our ancestors chose this. Not for sentiment, for survival. This is the cattail, scientifically known as Typha latifolia. It was engineered by evolution for one purpose, to feed continuously. Most crops give you one harvest a year. The cattail gives you 4. In early spring, young shoots emerge from the mud. You peel away the outer leaves to reveal a crisp white core. It tastes like cucumber. When Europeans first tasted it in Russia, they called it Cossack asparagus. It was a delicacy that saved thousands from scurvy after long winters. In early summer, the green flower heads appear. Before they pollinate, you harvest them and boil them. They taste like corn on the cob, but with a rich, earthy depth. In midsummer, the male flowers release their pollen. This isn't dust, it's gold. It's high-protein flour ready to harvest. You can shake a single stalk and collect tablespoons of it. Indigenous peoples mixed it with water to make bright yellow cakes and breads. In winter, when the rest of the world is dead and frozen, the real treasure is waiting underground. You dig the roots, the rhizomes. They're packed with 30 to 46% starch by weight. 1 acre of cattails can produce 6,400 pounds of flour. That's more than wheat, more than corn, more than rye. And you never planted a seed. The Paiute people had a clan called the Cattail Eaters. The Klamath called themselves the Cattail People. Daniel Mormon's massive ethnobotanical database catalogs. Native American plant use. The entry on cattails is one of the longest in the book. Virtually every tribe that lived near water understood the assignment. They dried the roots for winter storage. They pounded them into flour for porridge. But it wasn't just food, it was technology. They wove the leaves into waterproof mats for wigwams. They twisted the fibers into cordage stronger than hemp. They used the fluff from the seed heads to insulate moccasins against freezing snow and to line the diapers of infants. The jelly found between young leaves is a potent antiseptic and numbing agent used to treat wounds and toothaches. One plant provided food, medicine, shelter, and clothing. A natural stand can have 86,000 stems per acre. A single root system can spread to cover 3 acres. This wasn't a weed. This was infrastructure. And it required nothing. For 30,000 years, this was the definition of wealth. So how did a food system this abundant vanish? It wasn't nature that killed it. It was policy. The erasure began in 1849. The United States Congress passed the first Swampland Act. It gave millions of acres of federal wetlands to the states on one condition: drain them. The prevailing economic theory of the 19th century was simple. Water standing on land is waste. A geological dictionary from 1822 defined a swamp as a piece of land with wet, miry soil. Such land is unprofitable or even a nuisance until it be drained. Nuisance. That was the word they used for the ecosystem that fed the continent for 30,000 years. By 1850, the act expanded. Arkansas, Alabama, California, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, Wisconsin. 50 million acres were transferred with the mandate to destroy the hydrology. The government published guides on how to do it. Titles like Draining for Profit became bestsellers. In 1902, the invention of the Buckeye steam traction ditcher mechanized the destruction. It could lay drainage tiles faster than 100 men working by hand. The Great Black Swamp in Ohio, once a massive carbon sink and food forest, was drained completely dry. The Florida Everglades, 20 million acres, were channeled and diverted. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta was drained. Between the 1950s and 1970s, agricultural drainage alone destroyed 12 million acres of wetlands. Of the 221 million acres of wetlands that once existed in the lower 48 states, only 103 million remain. More than half gone, and with them, the cattails. What grew in their place? The Corn Belt, the richest agricultural region in the world. We traded a perennial, self-sustaining food system for annual crops that require billions of dollars in fertilizer, pesticides, and diesel fuel every single year. But wetlands weren't just drained for farmland. They were drained because cattails had a fatal flaw. They could not be controlled. You cannot sell someone cattail seeds. Every year, they replant themselves. You cannot patent a plant that spreads across 3 acres from a single root. You cannot tax someone for walking into a marsh and gathering pollen. A perennial food system that regenerates itself is a threat to an economy built on scarcity. An economy that requires people to buy seeds, fertilizer, and equipment every single year. So the wetlands were drained. The cattails were killed. And the knowledge was labeled primitive. But knowledge is harder to kill than plants, and nature has a way of offering solutions to the problems we create. Modern research on cattails began in the 1980s, not for food, but for energy. Scientists in Minnesota discovered that cattails produce 22 tons of biomass per acre. That's a staggering amount of energy potential. Then researchers found something even more important. Cattails are the kidneys of the earth. They absorb nitrogen and phosphorus from polluted water. The fertilizers we spread on our cornfields run off into rivers and lakes, causing toxic algae blooms that kill fish and poison drinking water. Planting cattails soaks up that pollution. Harvesting 250 acres of cattails removes 5 tons of phosphorus from the ecosystem. When you burn that biomass for fuel, the ash that remains is pure fertilizer. Phosphorus captured and ready to go back on the fields. It's a closed loop. The International Institute for Sustainable Development in Manitoba has been harvesting cattails commercially since 2012. They harvest 15 to 20 tons per acre. Each ton sequesters over a ton of carbon dioxide. And because cattails are perennial, you harvest them like a lawn. You cut them and they grow back next year. No plowing, no planting, no erosion. Compare that to corn. Annual planting, tilled soil, eroded topsoil washing into rivers, water pollution from fertilizer runoff. Cattails heal the water, build the soil, sequester carbon, and produce food for 12 months a year. But almost nobody knows this. We still call them weeds. Landowners across North America spend millions of dollars every year spraying herbicides to kill the most productive food plant on the continent. We are literally poisoning the solution to protect the problem. Think about what we're doing. We've destroyed over half of our wetlands. We've eliminated a food source that produces 6,400 pounds of flour per acre with zero inputs. We've replaced it with corn that requires constant fertilization, produces runoff that poisons our water, and contributes to massive dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. Then we spend millions trying to kill any cattails that grow back naturally, while simultaneously spending billions on carbon capture technology, water purification systems, and drought-resistant crop research. The plant that solves all these problems is growing for free, and we call it a weed. Let me put this in perspective. 1 acre of cattails produces 6,400 pounds of starchy flour from the roots alone. That's before you count the shoots in spring, the flower heads in early summer, and the pollen in midsummer. 1 acre of wheat produces about 2,800 pounds of grain. Corn produces about 3,000 pounds per acre in grain weight. Cattails produce more than double that from roots alone, with 3 additional harvests throughout the year, with 0 planting, 0 fertilizer, 0 pesticides, 0 irrigation in areas with natural wetlands. And they improve the ecosystem instead of degrading it. They clean water, they sequester carbon, they provide habitat for fish, birds, and countless other species. We destroyed this system on purpose because it couldn't be controlled and sold. The real reason wetlands were drained becomes clear when you follow the money. Every aspect of modern industrial agriculture is designed to create recurring revenue. Seeds must be purchased every year. Fertilizers must be applied constantly. Pesticides and herbicides are necessary to protect monocultures. Equipment must be bought or rented. Diesel fuel powers everything. Every step generates profit for someone. Seed companies, chemical companies, equipment manufacturers, fuel suppliers, cattails break this entire model. They're perennial, so you never buy seeds after the initial planting. They spread on their own, so you can't control distribution. They require no fertilizers because wetland ecosystems are naturally nutrient-rich. They have no significant pests, so no pesticides needed. They can be harvested by hand or with simple equipment. They represent food abundance without corporate intermediaries. That's why they had to go. The Swampland Act wasn't about making land productive. It was about making land profitable in a way that could be taxed, controlled, and monetized at every step. Today, we face multiple converging crises. Climate change is making weather unpredictable. We need crops that sequester carbon. We have water pollution from agricultural runoff. We need plants that clean water. We're losing topsoil to erosion. We need perennial systems that hold soil in place. Cattails solve all of these problems simultaneously. They're not a theoretical solution being researched in labs. They're a proven solution that worked for 30,000 years. The Manitoba project proves it works commercially in the modern era, but it remains a tiny pilot project. There's no major government initiative to restore wetlands for food production. No agricultural university is training farmers in cattail cultivation. No subsidies support wetland agriculture the way they support corn and soy. Why? Because wetlands can't be controlled the same way agricultural fields can. Because cattails can't generate recurring revenue. Because abundance without dependency is still seen as a threat. The story of the cattail is not about rediscovery. It's about recognition. The knowledge was never lost, only deliberately ignored. And now, while the world spends billions engineering drought-resistant crops and carbon capture machines, the answer has been waiting in the ditch by the side of the road. The plant that fed humanity for 30,000 years. The plant that survived the drainage of 118 million acres. It never stopped offering its gifts. It simply waited for us to remember. This knowledge is not lost. It grows in every marsh, every riverbank, every pond edge where cattails still stand. The plant we called a weed may be the future of survival. All it asks is that we look past the profit of the plow and see what was always there. The supermarket of the swamp, the four-season food source, the water purifier, the carbon sink, the perennial abundance that asked nothing and gave everything. Congress drained it in 1849 because it couldn't be taxed. Chemical companies poison it today because it can't be sold. Agricultural departments classify it as a nuisance because it succeeds without permission. But it's still here, still growing wherever water touches land. Still producing food 12 months a year. Still cleaning polluted water. Still sequestering carbon. Still waiting for us to stop destroying solutions and start recognizing them. The cattail survived 30,000 years of climate change, the last ice age, and a century of systematic destruction. It will survive our ignorance too. The question is whether we'll remember in time to benefit from what it offers. Whether we'll recognize that the weed we're poisoning is actually the food security. Water purification and carbon sequestration system we're desperately trying to engineer from scratch. The answer is growing in the marsh. It's been there all along, waiting, producing, offering, free. If this story changed how you see wetlands, weeds, and what we're told is valuable versus what actually is, share this video. More people need to understand what was destroyed and why. Subscribe for more investigations into food systems that were eliminated because they worked too well without generating profit. The next deep dive is already underway. The future of food security isn't in genetic engineering labs. It's in the ecosystems we drained, the plants we called weeds, to knowledge we labeled primitive. Cattails are still here, still producing, still cleaning water, still offering 30,000 years of proven food security to anyone willing to look past propaganda and see reality. The supermarket of the swamp is still open. We just forgot where we put it.